All right, Old Roller Nation, welcome to the show. First degree black belt under Master Pedro Sauer, Mark Cukro of Integrated Martial Arts in Harrisburg, North Carolina. Mark, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Super excited to have you. We got the chance to talk with Keith Owen about a month and a half ago, and he had so many things to say that were just huge about Pedro Sauer and referred to him as kind of a wizard and like the most mysterious man in the world. And so I'm having fun exploring that lineage because my lineage is a Carlson Gracie lineage. But you Pedro Sauer guys, I seem to get along with y'all pretty well. So I'm excited to dig into that some.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, and I think that you can get along with a lot of people from the Pedro Sauer lineage association, is it starts from the top. And you'll hear this from anyone that knows Master Pedro Sauer. The guy is a jiu-jitsu genius. And it's not something that a few people say. It's pretty much, in my experience, something that just about everyone says when they get to meet him. And I think it's great that we can come from different lineage and, you know, train and get along and get together. And so I like that, but it does start from the top because Master Pedro wholeheartedly believes that. And that kind of gets disseminated and out into the field. And most of the people under him feel the same way.
Well, that's I certainly agree with that. To get the show going, just give us a quick rundown of your introduction to jiu-jitsu. How did you come to it, and how did you go from whatever it was that you did previously to, you know, like being a black belt, academy owner, and all that stuff? It's a pretty cool story.
Yeah, so pretty much I started training like 27 years ago. I think it is something like that, right around there.
Is that all?
Yeah, a little while, you know. But I started off with JKD, Kali, Muay Thai, and then I did some catch wrestling, Judo. And in Charlotte, North Carolina, there was a great lineage for those arts here from a guy named Larry Hartzell. And so most everybody in the 80s and 90s was training in stand-up martial arts mostly. Mm-hmm. And we were one of the few people that I know of at the time that did that grappling thing, right? So it was really interesting because I remember, you know, people just being in total disbelief about how effective grappling was. And so in the mid 90s, and I'd have to look at the date, but we started noticing the Brazilian guys come to grappling tournaments, and we're like, man, these guys a lot of them are really good, and they have like a really different kind of game. And I was familiar with other grappling styles, but not specifically Brazilian or Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah. So the boys came to Charlotte, and that kind of set the buzz off in this part of the country. And most people still looked at the UFC and they really didn't quite know what to make of it just yet. And
was this post UFC 1, like
post UFC 1?
Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
So the buzz started, but people looked at it and still didn't really know what that guy was doing.
It just felt unreal.
It just felt unreal, and it was like, okay, I know he won, but I'm not really sure what he did. And you know, so everyone's like, I don't know, I got to figure it out, but I still don't understand what I'm trying to figure out. And so I started to look for jiu-jitsu, and I was in Atlanta for work. I had worked for a real estate company, and I saw this little alligator logo that said Master of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Jacare Cavalcante. And I was like, wow. And he had this little school, and it was before Alliance. And I had been training in, you know, Judo and other arts, and I'll just grappling. So, and I went in. He was very welcoming, and I met him, and I trained with the students. I had a great time, and I did pretty well. And then he called a couple guys out from the back. Man, they had their way with me, you know. And I was like, this is awesome. So I started to travel back and forth to Atlanta for work and on my own. And then I started discovering other people along the way. And then I remember very clearly, Boyce had an interview, and he said, man, if you think I'm good, you should meet my brother Hickson. And I was like, that's it. I'm finding this guy. And sure enough, not long after, a friend of mine in Charlotte set up a camp with him at the Grady Cole Center in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is a local university. And so I went there and I met him, and I was like just blown away. And I didn't know that he was really jiu-jitsu like royalty and a legend at the time. I just knew he was amazing. And of course, some guy calls him out in the middle of the seminar. And it was like, it was interesting because he's a really
it wasn't
big guy.
you, was it?
No, it wasn't me, man. I knew better. I mean, you know, I'm not a big guy. So this guy, because Hickson was teaching and goes, you're always going to get a guillotine, a kimura, or an upa sweep. You should pretty much always be able to get one. And the guy goes, man, that's not going to work. So, of course, Hickson made it work, choked the guy, pushed him to the side. We all finished training. And so that was my introduction to him. And then I learned from him as much as possible as anywhere I could go as I traveled to Atlanta, Tennessee, like all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And I eventually got up to the rank of purple belt. And then I met Master Pedro Sauer. And all along the time, Hickson was traveling and he had a lot of things going on. And everybody just kept saying, man, you got to meet this guy. I'm telling you, you'll like him. So I met him. And sure enough, I was blown away. I was like, man, this guy, holy smokes, does he understand the physical mechanics, the biomechanics of jiu-jitsu? And he can articulate it in a way that just makes sense. So I said, well, look, I'm starting from scratch with you. I mean, I appreciate you letting me keep my belt, but I'm starting from zero with you. And I've been training with him ever since, and that's been a long time. And so I stayed that belt for a long time. And then I stayed at the next one for a long time. And then eventually I got my black belt and my first degree 3 years later. And then this December will be my 6th year. So that's kind of my story. And then I opened an academy during all of that as well too.
The one thing that really excites me about what I call you OGs of American Jiu-Jitsu is that due to the lack of availability, like, so to give just like a little bit of like how it started for me, I started at 35 in 2015. And so I've been doing jiu-jitsu about 5 years and recently got the rank of purple belt right before we had, to shut down. So I'm very young in my jiu-jitsu kind of journey, but the availability of information is so great that I honestly think if you were willing to put in the time and you just had one training partner, you could get pretty darn good just off of YouTube. Whereas when you were starting, those resources didn't even exist, and like maybe the Gracie in Action tapes and then the Renzo Gracie tapes were like the two resources that you could have on your own. And other than that, you had to start traveling because there just weren't people around. And so I always have a huge respect for just the drive. I mean, you were already a fairly accomplished martial artist. And rather than saying, well, I'm pretty good at what I do, I don't need this stuff. You were putting in, like a lot of time and a lot of effort, a lot of gas money into going out and just getting training. I mean, to get a purple belt, while traveling, like having to travel to get it, that's huge. That's, I can't even relate to that because that part of my journey has been so easy. It's like there's a jiu-jitsu school around the corner, and if I look the other way, there's one that way too.
Yeah. I tell my students, I had to drive hours and spend weekends, and you guys have to drive 10 minutes and spend some time with someone that, paid the dues kind of. There was only a handful of us in the state at the time, and we're all pretty much around the same age, plus or minus a few years. And, I had training partners and other things, but it was like, I really want to add jiu-jitsu to my game because most of the other grappling styles, like jiu-jitsu suffocates movement, right? And it's not about imposition, it's about being in a position. And you can do either, but you can choose one. And I just really liked the style, and it just worked. And I remember the first time I got just handed, I got it handed, like, man, this was awesome. I got excited. And, the things that people don't know that you sacrifice is, number one, if you want to train with someone like Master Pedro or anyone else, you have to travel, and you have to travel to train with other people. And, you have to give up time with your family, time in whatever relationships you're in, time away from recreation. And you don't have a choice until you get proficient enough. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to start a training group and I started in a garage just to supplement my training and get more time on the mat. And then I started to travel. And I remember I was in a garage and we buy a space heater like every 2 months because the would burn up, you know. And then I moved into a little place.
That's hardcore right there.
Man, we didn't care, you know, and like we had to do warm-ups just to keep warm in the garage because it's just thin sheet metal.
I know a group of guys who on the sly rented a storage unit and that was their gym. They threw some mats down in there, and same thing. They were going through these space heaters, and you know, of course, there's some storage units have a, you know, like an electric hookup, you know, if you're going to store something that needs it, but not all. And I don't think theirs did. They were using like kerosene heaters and stuff, so they were probably like getting carbon monoxide poisoning and trying to train.
It's equivalent to altitude training. Yeah. I don't know. That's not. I mean, you do what you got to do, you know. But when you're serious, you'll figure it out for sure.
Yeah, and you know what you were saying, like the sacrifice and, you know, that choice, you just didn't have a choice. It was either do this or you're not gonna have the opportunity. I have so much respect for that because, you know, like I said, that part of my journey has been very easy. And having started a little bit older, the part of my journey that's tough is like my learning curve is a lot, you know, more shallow than it would have been if I had been able to start, you know, when I was in my youth. But I have learned how to learn from my occupation and things like that. So I can supplement what I now lack in, you know, we'll call it, you know, youth impairment, with drive and dedication and the willingness to do what it takes. And so just hearing that story from you about like, whatever the cost, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna get this, and it wasn't an arbitrary decision. Jiu-Jitsu was exposed to you, and instead of taking, you know, getting smashed and going, oh, screw this shit, you said, this is awesome. I want to be whatever that was. I want to be able to do that, and that's a tough one too, because I see a lot of people come through and they get that first couple of, you know, hard rounds and they go, yeah, that's not for me. And I'll be honest, it sucked. I didn't like it either, but I didn't have a feeling of, you know, I should be tougher or like I should be able to kick that dude's butt. I just had a feeling of, oh man, that was terrible.
Yeah. I mean, you know, so like, and my mentality too, I just got out of the military. I spent a few years at Fort Bragg in the airborne units there.
Well, thanks for your service.
No, hey, listen, man, you just do what you got to do. But I was kind of a little competitive, you know, and now, and I still am with myself. And I was like, okay, man, I got to figure this out. I got to do it until it comes a lot easier to me. And, you know, I didn't know how to tie my belt like anybody else, man. You know, I had a job like everybody else, and you eventually kind of find your way through it. You go through the ups and downs of the mental and emotional challenges and roller coaster. But you can't have any quit in you. If you have quit in you, jiu-jitsu will root it out. And if you root it out before and fix it and make sure it's not in you anymore, then you'll do well. But jiu-jitsu will find all the doubt in every corner of who you are.
Oh man, I couldn't agree more with that.
You know,
my first 3 months of jiu-jitsu, the question was not like, how good can I get? The question was, can I physically do this? Am I capable? And I actually got some private lessons with a friend. And the question, I said, look, man, just point blank, I don't know if I'm capable of this. And he was like, well, let's do a little work and see what you got. And, you know, he was a brown belt at the time. And he goes like, I'm not sure you can do it either, but let's put some work in and just give it his chance. You know, I'm going to try and we'll find something that you can be successful with. And it was funny that you said there's usually a guillotine or a kimura. Like guillotines was the beginning. You know, he was like, you got these short arms, you know, like you get those wrapped around somebody's neck, it's going to be a problem for them. So let's just see if we can get you where you can put somebody in a guillotine. Yeah. And if it hadn't been for that, I probably would have had to have quit just on the sensation that, hey, it's not that I want to quit. It's just that I ain't for this, you know, like I'm not built for this or whatever.
Yeah.
And go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's just, you know, your attributes will determine your game to an extent. right? And you can make leverage from every limb, but you can't make the same leverage as everybody else from your limbs. But even at 50, I'm 100 and just a little bit over 160 pounds, 2-3 pounds, a plus or minus a couple, but usually I float right around just slightly above 160. I'm 5'7". I've never been stronger or faster than anybody in my academy, but I think people have to understand that you can't thrash your training partners to death and expect them to be training partners. Like, you're on the same team, you don't do that in boxing. Welcome to boxing. I'm gonna put you in for 12 rounds with a pro, and they're just gonna beat on you. You don't do that in football. You don't do that you don't do that in anything. But I don't know why some jiu-jitsu people, I know why, but it's like, there's a difference between training to get your teammates better. You got to know when to pick it up and go hard. You can be tough and technical without being rough and reckless, and I think that's kind of the difference between the two. And then your joints are going to last a lot longer. But if you're stubborn, man, you're not going to have a long career in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, it's funny that you said that because, and especially given that you have some catch wrestling lineage, we had the opportunity to interview Joel Bain from Snake Pit USA, and he said when people start, catch wrestling has a real rough and tumble kind of reputation. Yeah. And so a lot of people think that if you start catch wrestling, that we're just gonna be clubbing you like a baby seal all day every day. And he goes, it's really not that way. What our goal is to build you up so that you can take that. But in order to do that, we can't beat you up before you can.
Exactly.
And so somebody from, within grappling, one of the, what we would call like hardest lineages, or like, hardcore, whatever you want to say, still saying we got to build you up before, we start to beat you up. And he was even saying in the beginning, I'm going to introduce you to pressure and I expect you to tap to it. Later on, you're going to grow into a state where you don't have to tap to that anymore. But in the beginning, your body doesn't understand it. You don't know how to frame against it. Like you've got to build a tolerance, but also a technical response. And that comes with practice. We can't just like smash you and go, well, you shouldn't have tapped. That's not going to work.
Yeah, no, it's true. And that's the thing, is like, you have to assimilate into the mindset and physical condition required to be able to handle it and benefit from it. And, like one of the things Master Pedro always praises is, what would you do if you were teaching your own children? Would you smash them and tell them to suck it up? That's how it is. Probably not. It's going to be fun. And then it's going to be a little tougher as you get older until you're an adult. And then you can handle it all. And all your joints are in good health. And, that's to me, that's a smarter approach, but it does have that kind of reputation. And, you could tell right away by the culture of a gym what the leadership is like too, and I travel all over the country doing seminars, and I visit academies all over the place. And within a minute, 30 seconds, exactly what it's going to be like when you're training there.
That's so cool. So what are those kind of telltale signs that you're looking at? Because that might help someone when it comes to, maybe someone's listening to this show that hasn't started jiu-jitsu but wants to. Maybe they step into a gym. What cultural cues are you picking up that tell you, what you're going to see?
So, there's a few things. Number one, if it takes more than a few seconds for you to be acknowledged, obviously whoever just walked through the door is not viewed as a priority. That's number one. Number two, just by the disposition and the temperament of the people, and I find that most people are really nice, and they'll tell you, hey, listen, when people start explaining what to expect, usually you're going to have a good experience. Man, go suit up, get on the mat. And, you have to ask things too. Like, I'm from out of town. I don't know what the rules are. Can you explain to me, like, when we roll, are we, is it go for broke? Is it flow, whatever it is. But I recommend, if you travel, to always contact them ahead of time. And man, you'll learn a lot. This way you don't show up as a surprise, because if you show up as a surprise, very often you're perceived as a threat. Because you're wearing a different gi and a different patch, and people really don't quite know what to think. But I walked into one place, and it was out west. I'll just put it that way. And it was, holy, this guy's a Pedro Sauer black belt. He goes, hey, everybody, circle up. And I'm like, oh man, I didn't know if I was getting an introduction or like, what is happening? He goes, this guy's a Pedro Sauer black belt. Anybody that wants to roll, all of you go over there and line up. And I was like, oh my God, man. Dude, I came to train. I talked to the guy. He seemed cool. At least half to 2/3 of the class lines up like, man, I can't roll 40 people, you know, but it was like the fact that you did that says a lot about you, right? You know, now if I go to another place and they're like, hey man, I'm so glad you're here. Listen, don't worry about, just wear your patch, wear your uniform. You know, you're going to have a good time. I just want you to look, you be cool. Our students will be cool. Everyone's going to be very respectful to you. Almost always have a good experience.
Mm-hmm.
If the peering tough guy attitude and that you're not really addressed when you come in the door, and when you're talked to, they're kind of dismissive. You're probably not going to have the same level of experience. And if people talk about rivalries within the first minute, you're probably not going to have a good experience. And I went to one place and the guy was like, listen, man, you know, we normally don't put people in from other teams, but, and then he wanted like some kind of secret handshake. And I was like, what?
Yeah,
I was like,
no.
you know what, man, I just came to say hello. And I know exactly. And so if I don't pick up on a good vibe, I'm not training there, man, you know? And that's just how it is.
Yeah. I think first off, having 27 years of experience, and secondly, you know, being 50, you get the right to say, you know what, this ain't the place, you know? But I travel for work too. And what you said about reaching out first has been such a huge thing, because there might be, maybe there's 4 schools within range of the hotel, you know, like that I could Uber or taxi to. Mm-hmm. I'll shoot a message to all 4 of them. And based on the response that I get, that's the one that I'll choose. So if I get one that's like, it's going to be $40 and, you know, show up and, you know, like, you'll have to rent our D and, you know, these different things, it's not likely I'm going there. But, if the place is like, oh man, we love visitors. We're so excited to have you. Where you're coming from. And if you come in about 10 or 15 minutes early, that'll give us time to show you the locker room and get you signed in for the waiver and all that. Then I can tell that that's a place where I'm going to be treated like family. And that's definitely going to be much more likelihood that I'll go there.
Yeah. And there's little things like when people want to visit us, which happens all the time, tell them, look, number one, have fun, train, be respectful. We don't allow any meatheads on the mat. You're going to have a good experience here. And I tell them this straight up. My students will treat you with the utmost respect, and I fully expect that from you. So if you want good training, come in, man. We'd love to have you. And that conversation kind of filters out a lot of that. And it doesn't happen as much as it used to, but it does on occasion.
Yeah, the only negative experience that I've had while traveling, it was somewhere in the Midwest. And, you know, I never wrestled, but, you know, a lot of my coaches are wrestlers. And so I have a pretty good amount of wrestling infused in my jiu-jitsu just kind of by default because of my coaches. And so I went to a place in the Midwest and they had, you know, like a lot of Division I wrestlers at this school. And so they were all about like, let's start standing and all. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. We'll wrestle. You know, it's 100%. But after the second takedown or so, I could tell that really it didn't make a whole lot of sense for me to continue to wrestle with these guys because it was a waste of their time and kind of a waste of mine. I was so far out of their league that, you know, I couldn't even give them a good training stimulus. So I started pulling guard, and previous in a round, somebody had put a leg lock on me. So I started pulling guard and using leg locks, which if it happened to me, I thought that's, you know, like we use leg locks.
It would be an acceptable thing. Yeah.
So there was a guy watching. He was one of the purple belts. I think I was either a white or a blue belt at the time. And he weighed like 270 pounds. I mean, he was like a harbor seal. And he after this round, he comes over and is like, you know, let's roll or whatever. And then he just spends the entire round basically just belly flopping on me. And he's like, this is what you get when you pull guard for leg locks. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you know, I wasn't trying to in any way disrespect the school or anything. Yeah. It was like I didn't initiate any leg exchanges. It was just that they were there, so I took them. You know, I don't know. That frustrated me, but that's in probably 40 times going to somebody else's school, that's the only time that I've ever had a negative experience. So
yeah, it's rare.
So I can't really say that, you know, I feel I don't feel a whole lot of worry going to places. I usually feel excited, especially if they reach out.
Well, you should. And let me say to anyone watching this, you should definitely go to train other places. Just kind of find out what's acceptable. Like some places, leg locks are taboo, man. Like people get upset. I'm all for it as long as you put them on responsibly.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's a great attitude. You know, like I'm not going for the finish. I'm not trying to take your leg home. I'm going to set up the entanglement, and I might set up the grip, but even with that, it's going to be loose, and then I'm going to wait. You know, like how are we going to play this?
We'll see. You know, and if the person is going nuts, well, hang on, man, relax, dude. It's okay. You know, you should probably know the saying, right? You always walk in like a cat and then walk out like a lion, right? You know,
yeah.
Don't walk in like a lion. It's, you know, but it's an interesting thing too. The more experience you gain in jiu-jitsu, not always, but I feel mostly the more tempered and lower your ego is. And an ego is a healthy thing to have as long as it's healthy, right? But if it's unhealthy, man, that's no good. And there, you know, there's always going to be some of those guys, but by far, most of my experiences have been very positive with just a few. And those are where the good stories come from.
I had an old hillbilly friend that said a bad experience always makes for a good story.
It's so true. Hold my beer, watch this, stand back, whenever. Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about, you know, kind of going from white belt to black belt. Obviously, you had, you know, some strange experience in terms of it. It's not strange. Given the time period in America, it was actually probably pretty normal. But in comparison to where we're starting, it's very different. What are some of the things along the journey, you know, little hiccups, maybe views that you had as a white belt or a blue belt or a purple belt that have changed over time? Things that black belt looking back, you know, would be able to pass on to yourself if you were just starting, or maybe even at, you know, halfway through, or, you know, brown belt, purple belt, whatever.
Yeah. So there's my 3 basic rules: is show up. Number 2, show up when you don't feel like it. And number 3, show up when you really don't feel like it. And then number 3, when you really don't want to go. And you're always going to feel better. But, you know, the thing that changes, because this is a challenge I find with people too. If they're remarkably brilliant in one area of their life, academically, professionally, whatever it is, you are not remarkably brilliant at jiu-jitsu. Clean slate. Now, your experiences may influence your progression and path, but you're starting off new just like everybody else. And your level of observation changes. So the white belt, and this is my analogy, Master Pedro uses it, but your first year is just learning how to defend everything. You should be like the fish that someone dropped in the bottom of a boat that you're trying to pick up, and you just can't grab the fish. And no matter what, hardly anyone can grab you or hold you down, and you slip out all over the place. And that's really your goal, because when you can defend everything, your injuries are a lot less likely to happen. And there's an abundance of issues. Where there's an abundance of injuries, there's an issue with the methodology of training. Injuries should happen on rare occasion because they're accidents. But if they happen on a regular basis, the methodology needs to be checked, or the culture, in my opinion. So then when you move to a blue belt, now you move from static movement. This is how the Americana is done. This is how the Kimura is done. I want it exactly this way and that way. And your first 1 to 2 years should be exclusively, in my opinion, focusing on fundamentals, but allowing novelty and exploration for other parts, because it's got to be fun too. And then you'll start to go through this like rudimentary skill tool development. And then you typically will get into like a technique acquisition phase where you go through you want to know everything that's out there. And you start taking all this information and you start watching videos and you start listening to other people and you start looking at other games and you start wanting to learn everything. And then in a blue belt, you start to learn how to transition from one technique to another. And that's where sweeps become a huge part of your game. So white to blue survive, blue to purple, sweeps, transitions, and grips. And if you focus on those, you're good. And that would be like the fluidity of your movement.
Mm-hmm.
Now at purple belt, you have to stop thinking, at blue belt, you have to stop thinking that you're better than you are. At purple belt, you have to usually stop thinking that you know more than you do, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Belt is usually where people get frustrated and quit. And if you make it past that, man, you're going to probably get a black belt. You can be doing it a long time. So the attrition usually happens between blue and purple. Purple probably would be the end of the peak of that. And then when someone gets a brown belt, now they're figuring out, okay, my jiu-jitsu is not, it should be anyway, in my opinion, it's not attribute based, it's leverage based, it's physics based, it's timing based, it's all of the concepts based on my personal style and my attributes, but it's not just attribute based. So if you took all the muscle off your skeleton, would you still have good jiu-jitsu? Would your frames be sharp? Would your shrimps be on point? Could you get out a cross side? Now, once you have that and you put muscle on, man, you have a good nitrous bottle to keep pushing the button whenever you want. And but you can't run on that bottle the whole time, right? And then when you get a black belt, in my most sincere and humble opinion, you realize you don't know much jiu-jitsu. And
Great.
I'm just saying, but
thanks,
it's like
Mark.
this, it's a relief at the same time, because you're like, every time you get a belt, you're like, yes. And then you're like, okay, now I have to represent that belt. I want to feel like I represent that belt well. It takes a couple of months to feel comfortable in each belt. And I think it took me about 6 to look at my black belt and think, this is me, this is my jiu-jitsu. Like, I represent this now. Because the day I got it, I was only one day better than yesterday, right?
Right.
I'm also a big fan of studying the fundamentals, even if you don't like them, because what happens very often, if you have kids, you can relate to it. And if you don't, you were one. And I think you have this experience in life. I don't see why I have to do this. I don't like it. I don't want to do that. Do I have to do that? And your teacher says yes, or your coach. And you go, oh, man, I don't understand. This is not my preference. It's not my game. Well, you're a lower belt. You don't know your game yet, which is why you're given things you don't like, because you may discover the one thing that you wanted to avoid turns out to be the best thing for your game. And so that's why I personally prefer an organized curriculum, at least through midway of your belts. And while at the same time you explore and do your own things. But if your instructor says to work on some sweeps, you should work on them. You may not like them. And then 2 years later, you're like, dude, now I totally understand why you did that. And now I'm getting those sweeps all over the place. Mm-hmm. But during all of your jiu-jitsu, life will change, time will change, you'll change, your attitude will change, your emotional maturity will change. You may change relationships, jobs, you may move. But how great is it to be amazing at something, man? You know, like some people will they'll get jealous of their significant other because they train so much. And it's like, you're not more important, but this is part of me and who I am. And I'm not trying to replace you. I'm trying to do something that means the world to me, that allows me to express myself in a way that nothing else does. Mm-hmm. And trying for you to compete with that. I just want some time to go do it, and I'm going to be a better person after class. And so I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of my insight, because I hear that from students sometimes. And so I just want to say that, like, make sure the person that you're with knows that you're not trying to, you don't want them to compete with jiu-jitsu. You just want to go do it and come back and be in a better mood and be healthy. And I think everyone will appreciate when you come back from the academy in a better mood if you went there and you weren't in a great one.
You know, what you're saying there is so timely. Right when we were sort of forced to shut down due to the COVID-19 scenario, within 2 weeks of my last class, I started getting really crabby and not like myself with my children. You know, like my wife and I, our marriage is it's really pretty simple. I've seen a lot of marriages that are much more complex than ours. You know, we don't have a lot of difficulty. If I'm in a bad mood, you know, she just kind of gives me space. And if she's in a bad mood, I give and we work that way. But with your kids, that doesn't work. You know, my 3-year-old is not going to not want to hang out with me, even if I'm in a, you know, crap mood. And so I found that I was not myself as a father, and I had to start working out like 3 or 4 times a day to just burn off the anxious energy that jiu-jitsu was taken away from. Like it was fixing a lot of, I don't want to say mental health, but at least mood stabilization. It was checking a lot of boxes for me that I didn't know it was even doing.
Well, and you have directed energy, right? And then you have misdirected energy. And if you can't expend that energy through something positive like jiu-jitsu or your routines, that energy builds up and then it's misdirected and can come out in a negative way. And that's everybody. I'm not a perfect parent. I'm not a perfect person. Nobody is. But
Right.
I'm a lot calmer when I train every couple of days, every day. I usually train once or twice a day, but you can feel it, right? Build up. And then you're like, you know what? I got to go train. Come back, you're in a better mood. You get that energy out. And now you can have the relief to direct your energy in a more positive way.
Mm-hmm.
And man, if you have kids, they know how to push your buttons, and they know, and they don't care when you're not feeling good because they want time with the parent, and that's their priority. And then you're like, I need a few minutes, and they don't let it go. And so I can relate to that too. I think everybody can.
Well, I loved your description of like the flow up through the belts and what to prioritize and what to think about. One thing that you said there that I think is kind of a key. You said focus on the fundamentals, for a time. How do you define the fundamentals? Because I find that if I ask one person what are the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu, their answer will be similar, but almost never the same as someone else's. So what to you are the fundamentals?
Yeah, so the fundamentals are movements that everybody can do, but they're reliant on science and physics. So like, for example, there's 2 basic ways to upa, right? You should know those. There's only 3 basic shrimps, both feet, inside foot, outside foot. And then you have forwards and backwards. You should know those. How to have someone in cross-side, put all of your weight on one shoulder and turn until they can no longer hold you down. And then you should have at least one escape from every position. And if a 6-year-old can't do it, or let's say a 10-year-old that understands, that can communicate, if they can't do it, but an adult can, you may want to reevaluate that. So the fundamentals to me are based on, because the professor says this, but he says, jiu-jitsu doesn't make miracles, it makes leverage. And you have to understand how to make leverage. So the fundamentals are, do you know how to make a frame with both hands? Do you know how to make a frame with your hands flattened? Do you know how to get escape to each side with a rear naked choke in, right? There's no better side. There's just the one that you're presented with. Now, an instructor may say there is, but to me, the fundamental is what there would be a universal consensus on by pretty much all instructors. There's a difference between a preference and an incorrect technique.
Mm-hmm.
So if you and I have a preference, well, I like to put my hand this way, but we say, look, well, you know what? We're pretty much agreeing on the same thing. Let it go. It's a preference, right? As long as it's scientifically solid, I guess it'd be the way. What I don't like to see is an advanced belt that doesn't know how to shrimp or why they shrimp a certain way, or when to put hooks in and when not. You should never do a cross choke with your elbows, right? Your palm should be up and you should roll your fingers and then bring your chest in. So a round object pushes a triangle to tighten the space. That would be a fundamental. Things like that. So we have a solid fundamental curriculum because we came of our lineage, but there are a lot of other people that do too. What I would prefer not to see in the beginning are fanciful passes that are very athletic and attribute based. And so you have what is like a transferable and non-transferable skill. So just because I can do it doesn't mean all my students can do it. And I'm not going to teach you things that only I can pull off. I'm going to teach you things that everybody can pull off. So the straight arm bar is a prime example. The rear naked choke, the cross choke, Americana, Kimura, those are all fundamentals. Now, your setup for those may be advanced, but the move itself, I don't think you should have a blue belt until you can do all of those. What I don't see is a flying, rolling knee bar from that can shrimp. And here's my
you picking on me, Mark?
Man, let me tell you, I love some leg locks, but you get the idea. And I kind of get excited talking about this because I noticed from the years of running an academy, once we instilled the standard curriculum for white to blue, man, I can tell immediately by rolling with someone if they spend a lot of time on the fundamentals, because they know how to elbow escape and get all that space on one side. But if you ask 10 blue belts from the same academy at the same time, can you guys all tell me, ladies and gentlemen, can you tell me what you did to get your blue belt, what you had to know, what you had to know? And if they all kind of look at each other and they're like, well then that, I don't even know what to say. Like, the thing I like about the fundamental curriculum and even testing for the belts, and people have different opinions, but nobody can say you didn't publicly have to perform at the mission. It eliminates buddy promoting. It eliminates fast track promoting. Everybody gets the same standards. You're not passing until you get the minimum score of 95. And if it takes a year, fine. If it takes 5, fine. But and the thing is you and I are not going to move the same. Why would we be measured the same? You know, but you're going to be measured by the same standards, maybe not the same time period. And you may learn things faster than me in some areas, and it might be the other way in others. But don't use time as your reference, but also don't sandbag time either. I don't like when people are like, it's not about the belts, and then they want a belt.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with getting a belt, and there's nothing wrong with giving stripes, and there's nothing wrong with not giving them. But as long as you know your standards, like, my job as a coach is to help my students achieve their goals. It's not to tell them that asking what they need to do is taboo. And I don't like that either. Oh, it's taboo, don't ask. No, you should ask. What you shouldn't do is demand or tell me with some sense of entitlement. But if you say, hey, coach, can you tell me what I need to work on? I should have an answer. Otherwise, I'm not a coach.
Yeah, that's a lot different question.
I don't want your help, you know?
Yeah, that's a whole lot different question than why haven't I got my belt yet? You know?
Totally different. Yeah. Now, if someone says, where's my belt? Why don't I have it? Well, then that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
You sincerely ask, I don't know what to do. Can you tell me what I need to work on? We should have answers.
Yeah, I actually, throughout my 5 years, I've tried to have a private lesson with my instructor at least once every 3 months. And it's just to go over, you know, my progress and what I'm missing, you know, and it's not necessarily belt driven. From white to blue, there was a very definitive standard. The Haleo Gracie's 36 techniques. If you can perform those, then you're a blue belt, and if you can't, you're not. And it's very cut and dried. From blue to purple, in you know, our discussions, it was more about the movement than the moves. You know, it's like, I need to see fluidity and connection and transition. I need to see you looking more and more like not necessarily an expert, but certainly not a novice anymore. And so we would have those meetings, and we wouldn't necessarily exchange a lot of technique. It wouldn't be a private lesson where he's, you know, showing me a new way to finish the arm bar. It would be, these are the things I'm not seeing. These are the things you need to practice so that, you know, they can come into your game. And I felt really fortunate that he was willing to do that for me, and never think that I was asking, like, why don't I have a purple belt yet? Because that was not the question. The question was, what do I need to demonstrate to you so that you can see a purple belt in me?
Well, and that's a more authentic, sincere, and purposeful question, and it's more productive. And, you know, what I look for, people ask me too, like, what do you look for in a blue belt? Okay, for us, we have to have 88 moves. You got to know them. If you don't know them, you're not getting it. If you do, you have a chance. So after that, the movement is more important than the technique. That's why you don't never miss warm-ups, ever. Your warm-ups shouldn't be exercise just for the sake of exercise. A warm-up should be exercise with isolated, dissected techniques into the movements, so the movement is easy to learn the technique. Because if the movement's easy, the technique gets learned easy. If you just teach technique without movement, you can't move to the technique. And so you have to have movement, technique, refinement, and then you put all that together. Now, when you get to like purple belt and brown belt, yeah, you have way more like discretion to do that. The analogy I use is like Rembrandt and Michelangelo are they're masterful painters, or they were. They both needed to learn how to mix paint and use a brush. After that, you paint what you want. But you shouldn't avoid fundamentals, because they'll be with you for the rest of your life, whether you're in shape or not. And so that's kind of my perspective. You know, But I think there should be some standardization for at least the first one or two, but you can't just like pick techniques as an instructor, like, I like this one, I like that one.
Mm-hmm.
You have to think when you look at fundamentals, what will you use for the rest of your jiu-jitsu journey, career, or life? And what will carry all of the other techniques? Like if you boil down all the techniques to root movement or root causes, that's what your fundamentals should be. And, you know, that's just my opinion, but, and, you know, and I do a lot of curriculum development in and outside of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And it's important. It's a long way.
Well, you know what you said there, it's interesting that you phrased it that way, because that actually goes to the heart of the purpose of the Old Rollers podcast, which is how can we be as dangerous as possible for as long as possible?
Yeah.
And the joke of the show is that I want to roll dangerously into my 65th birthday. Well, after having met Tom Corey, who started at 65 and is a badass brown belt at 72, I've now got to up my standards of how long I want to roll dangerously, because he is dangerous at 72.
Yeah.
That being said, when you're talking about fundamentals and using as your assessment kind of matrix for what is a fundamental, what can I do for the rest of my life? And what is an effective thing that I could do and you know, have all the muscle taken away from my bone? There's a question of longevity there too. Because, you know, as we age, there is going to be some decline in musculature. It's not as extreme as a lot of people think, but it does exist. We can slow it, we can mitigate it, but we can't eliminate it. So just like what you said with leverage and things like that, like if we're choosing techniques to practice now that we'll be able to use in 20 years, in 30 years, well, by the time we get to that 30-year mark, we should be pretty darn good at these things that we're doing if they work for us, if they're going to work for us then.
Yeah. Oh, the other thing too is like, and let me say this, I mean this with the utmost respect. I'm not picking on any art or any style or anything, but if you're like, say, like I have a woman that trains here, she's 69. Yeah, she's amazing. She was very timid and shy, and now she'll try to really bring it to you, and it's nice, but I'm not going to teach her lasso guard. You know, your knees are not designed for lateral pressure.
Mm-hmm.
You're in an advanced age. If you're young, you do whatever you want. If you want to do it, you know, but like, I wouldn't teach that to her, and I wouldn't teach her to invert. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with it. It's just to say it doesn't fit this person in this particular circumstance or an older. But you can be dangerous. I love when the young guys are just like they look around the room and they pick the small person or the old guy. Yeah, I don't know, man. You think that, you know? And it's interesting. It's just fun because when you learn to have jiu-jitsu like with a surgical precision, leverage based, movement based, man, the people that are very physical and don't have it, they cannot understand how you do so good against them. They're perplexed. They're totally like dumbfounded. And that's why a lot of times you'll find senior people in jiu-jitsu friends with younger people, because the younger people are like, I don't understand how you do it. And then they pass it on what they have to do because they have no choice. And that's one of the things I like about jiu-jitsu too, is like the socialization that takes place would never take place outside the academy. And, you know, I've got people here, like I remember that some of these guys come in, like one young man came in and he was like, I got to roll a girl. And I was like, oh man, okay. So the little girl came over, and I won't say her name but we're on a podcast, but she's got pigtails and braces, and she's like, hi, you can train. Just like, I was like, I was kind of proud. And he turns around and he looks at me and he goes, go figure. And he was serious. And so now they're fast friends, right? You know, and but the thing is too, is like, I like about jiu-jitsu is you can have a totally different expectation and outcome and then still shake hands and bump hands at the end of the day. But if you want to do jiu-jitsu for a long, long time, you have to learn how to use your feet and your legs as part of your jiu-jitsu. How to grip and how to post and how to frame with your legs. And if you're driving an Americana, you don't push with your arms, you push with your foot through your arms, right? and just, little things like that. And it makes my day when I see people that are just underestimated do well. And I like to see everybody do well, but that especially adds an extra little
Oh yeah.
from me, so.
Yeah, that's the icing on the cake. I agree with you.
Yeah.
And what you said there about the social interaction, that's almost identical to what Coach Matt Thornton from SBG said. His goal is to create a mat culture, but also a training curriculum and a training method where a 25-year-old professional MMA fighter who's, in the UFC can get quality training in a round with a 55-year-old soccer mom. And he's like, it's not just for the soccer mom. It's for the MMA fighter. He goes, because at some point, he's not going to be a 25-year-old MMA fighter anymore. And learning how to have the empathy and the ability to create a quality training scenario with a person who is, not on, in your same league athletically, that empathy skill, that's a muscle that we develop that later on, if they want to go into business, if they want to start an academy, if they want to, have a landscaping business, whatever, that skill will carry with them, for the rest of their life. That's a jiu-jitsu skill that we can then take off the mat and use. And believe me, people who have a high, emotional intelligence do fairly well in business, more so than people who are great at crunching numbers but can't, communicate or connect with people.
Well, and I think, just what you said, EQ is equally as important, if not more important, than a business. Most successful businesses have a good culture and they have a good social presence when you go into their business. And you could be a genius, but if people can't stand you, you're not going to be effective at running a business. And you can be a black belt and have 0 students. You could be a black belt and be an awful teacher. And you could be a blue belt and be an amazing teacher, or vice versa, right? But the thing in jiu-jitsu too is like your mindset is something that you need to train as much as your skill set. And I think far too many people overlook that. And your mindset is how you talk to yourself, your inner dialogue, how you interact with people, and what you feed your mind. Like you can't put negative thoughts in your mind and have positive outcomes in your life. You have to put good thought in. You have to put good food in. You have to put good exercise in to get good outcomes. And I think that's something that a lot of people should do or try to do more of. And if you have an MMA fighter, and we have people that compete all the time, and it's like, you can, let me tell you, man, let me get one of those teenagers on you that have been training since they're 3 years old. They're like little brown and black belts running around that are 50. Man, they're nightmares. Let them put a choke on and you can get out. Now let them put a choke on the other side. You hold 2 tennis balls and you can't let go. Now get out. And so there's ways, to do that. And you can make them hold something in their hands like a belt. You can't let go of the belt and you have to grapple. And man, you're going to get good fast. You're going to have an entirely new appreciation from micro movements, small movements, and little details and escapes. And so I don't know Matt personally, but I agree with what he's trying to do. Is everybody can benefit something as long as you understand how to get to that part of the training. And I think that's a key factor.
Yeah. What was exciting to me about that, and then hearing you talk about that as well, is that to give an example, from my own gym, we have a bunch of 25-year-old police officers and first responders, and then we have some attorneys. Myself, I'm an airline pilot. We have a couple of doctors. So it's this strange, and then we have some very young pro or semi or amateur MMA fighters as well, and we all get along. And it's just like the recognition that we're all looking for the same thing, which is to get better. A 25-year-old pro MMA fighter is not trying to get, just like a crazy hard round with me. He's trying to have a technical exchange with me, and I can provide that stimulus. I can't react the way a 25-year-old would, but I can give you a technical experience if you're willing to, down-regulate to my pace. And then you can take that experience and speed it up to your MMA pace when that time comes.
Yeah. Or you could just say, I'm going to attack. You can only defend. You can't do anything else. The minute you get out, we start over, there's a million things you can do. And the thing is too, with a lot of students, especially blue belts and purple belts, and brown belts too, or really everybody, it's that people not only just want to get better, they want to feel like they're getting better.
Mm-hmm.
That's a key component, because if you ask your coach, am I getting better? Yep, you're getting better. Well, they're not lying to you. You're getting better. You showed up. You may not feel that way, but you're getting better. And I don't think anyone can show up and get worse. That's kind of hard to do. I mean,
I don't know. I
mean, it's possible, but
there was some time.
The probability is much lower, right? So let's just go with that. The probability is much lower if you show up and put in genuine effort. But the other thing is, when you start feeling like you're doing worse, you're usually getting ready for a leap in skill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from strength training, from that world, we had what we called the compensation curve, or the adaptation curve.
Yeah.
So you have a training stimulus, and that's going to cause some sort of a negative, a loss of performance for a brief time while the body recovers, and then after that recovery, you then have a period of what's called super compensation, where your growth. So like, let's say previously you could bench press 150 pounds, and then today, for whatever reason, 120 was all you had. And so you take a week's rest, and then you come back and you're bench pressing 175 pounds. That 175 is your super compensation, but the cost of that is that you had to have a week where you could only do 120. And that's not a fun week. Especially.
Yeah.
But I think that same thing can happen in technical development too. If you're in a period of skill, going from skill acquisition to skill integration, the line between that acquisition and integration is maybe tough to see. And then once it does integrate, suddenly you've made a leap. But while it was trying to happen, it felt like a loss.
Yeah, because you're like, I don't feel like I'm getting better, but I took a week off and I came back and my game is fire.
Yeah.
That happens. And you're like, I don't even understand. I didn't train for 5 days and I'm doing better. But yeah, it just goes through those cycles. And I wish more people would spend time talking and listening to coaches and I mean, like, really, really accepting that when your coach tells you that you're supposed to get worse before you get better, they mean it. And really, you feel that way. And it's not that you're declining. It's just that you feel that. It's just exactly what you said, right? And, it just depends. But the fighters can always get someone from this. They can always benefit from someone that's not a fighter. And people can benefit from each other in different ways. I think as coaches, we want everyone to reach their goals. But at the same time, I would really like to build a better, more confident, fitter, healthy society that has a few fighters at the academy than just focus on the fighters. Because, of the small percentage are going to be fighters, but they need their training too, but they can get training. And, if you start looking at all the coaches that are really highly regarded and highly successful, they kind of say a lot of the same things. And that's because there's a lot of truth in those consistencies. It's not the ultimate truth, but overall, you'll start to see like kind of a consensus or like a predominance of things. And that's, and so there's a lot in that. And then you have like the few percentages on each end of the spectrum that are just nonconformists and still get it done anyway. And some people like to focus on those, and some people like to focus on the main body of consensus. But I think at the end of the day, if you're doing jiu-jitsu, you're better than anyone that's sitting home being critical. You're developing every time. And even if you don't feel like it, you are. And you should ask for feedback, and you should get it from your coach. And nothing should be taboo in a conversation with your coach to get better, as long as it comes from a good place and has no entitlement attached to it. So I don't know, but that's my take on it.
I really like what you said there, about the idea that most people will wind up, if people are coaching and training at a high level, they're going to say a lot of the same things. In the East, we might say, like, they have found the way. in the West, we would say like excellence leaves tracks. And so I think that kind of leads me to one of the things that I wanted to talk with you coming from Keith. And Keith, by the way, said that because I texted him, I was like, hey, I'm going to have a couple of Pedro Sauer black belts, on the show this week. What is something I need to ask them, like that you would want to hear, from your own experience? He goes, ask them about Pedro. so So I think there's a clear consensus that Pedro is a very high level teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about some things from that experience that creates that separation that makes him such a great teacher, and why you chose to go with him, and part of that is your experience, but part of that will be a universal experience within the association, I would think.
Yeah, so when you meet him, first of all, the thing is, one thing I appreciate a lot is that he's a genuinely wonderful human being. And to me, that goes a long way. A lot of people can teach jiu-jitsu, but I really want to learn from someone that really lives what it's supposed to represent, in my opinion. He's very intelligent, and he's very articulate. Even though English is his second language, he speaks at a high level and really thoroughly understands the biomechanics of the human body. And he explains things in a conceptual way that you're just like, you have these constant epiphanies. And he's the only person I know that you can have 50 black belts in a room, handful of world champions, and they go, why did I not know that before? Like, it just makes so much sense. And everybody I know that meets him says the same kind of things. But he moves like a wet blanket that has the weight of a feather. It's really interesting. And I think a lot of it becomes because he grew up with the Gracie family, all of them. And, he was the least skilled when he started training. So he had to learn how to defend himself against all of those guys. And they were all monsters already by the time they're teenagers.
Yeah.
And, but he just is a classy guy. And when he explains things, he has a gift of communication that just pours out of him effortlessly. And when he explains jiu-jitsu, anyone that's good at jiu-jitsu, they all lean in and they get quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just him everywhere he goes. And you can talk to him about anything. He's very non-judgmental. And he always makes people feel better about anything they ask him about, and they always wind up leaving being better. And I've seen a lot of the top names in jiu-jitsu, world champions, multiple times, come to our camps, and they're like, let me ask you a question. And usually they'll share a technique or two, and then everyone's grateful. And then they'll see professor teach, and then they're like, huh. And you could just see them lean in, and all of a sudden the wheels are turning. And then almost always they ask him a question, and he goes, oh, my friend, just do it like this. And they go, and it's amazing to see so many people. And I don't know how he does it. It just pours out of him like anything else. And, but I've trained with a lot of people, a lot, and a lot of really highly regarded coaches. And he is easily one of the most gifted instructors and people that I know. And yes, he's my professor, and I'm saying that, but it's true. I've trained with a lot of people. And if you ever train with Hickson, it's the same way. You're just like, oh my goodness, the simplest things, and then that simple efficiency goes throughout all of your jiu-jitsu. And that's what I like about it. And he uses his feet a lot too. His feet he calls them leg hands. They're and you start training and you're like, what that? Oh my goodness. But there are a few people like him. Like, you talk to guys like Keith is an amazing man. That guy knows jiu-jitsu, let me tell you.
Yeah.
He tells it like it is, and he's a very authentic person. And Master Pedro never tries to be anyone but himself. And if, he needs to ask a question, he's like a kid in a candy shop with jiu-jitsu. He never treats or thinks anyone should be treated differently because of their rank. He just shows you respect because you're a human being.
Mm-hmm.
I like that he perpetuates that message through the association, and he helps people, grow their academies, not just their jiu-jitsu, in a good, healthy way. So I'm telling you, man, you won't meet many people like him. Mm-mm.
Yeah, that's an awesome, story because it almost directly mirrors what Keith said. And so just hearing him gush like that, I thought that's going to be a fun thing to explore. And
Yeah.
your experience, while separate, is very, very similar. So I don't know, that's exciting to hear, because Pedro's not a tremendously young guy. He's youth impaired like the rest of us old rollers.
Yeah.
And a lot of people talk about him, that he doesn't feel, you don't feel any age on him, like it's a type of jiu-jitsu that is ageless.
Yeah, and when you train with him, like, he rolls with some people, and some people he'll just kind of play around with and say, okay, moves, let me see how you get out, stop, and he'll give you a tip. But it's like he has that the feel of his weight and leverage and distribution, like a lot of the old timer greats do. It's like, I can move, but none of it is good for me. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Pose his game on you. You just feel like everything you do is a trap waiting to happen. And yeah, it's like pushing water, and then it comes back and gets you.
So, having been, grappling for over 27 years, I'm sure you've seen a lot of the evolution of the art, or the evolution of the sport, however you wish to define it. What are some of the key things that you think have maybe brought about some of the changes that we've seen, like just in terms from day one to today?
Well, in the beginning, the jiu-jitsu was more self-defense, ballet tudo kind of oriented, right? Like no holds barred. So you could pretty much do whatever you wanted in jiu-jitsu, and it was highly regarded not to get punched in the face or get hit with strikes. As much as possible, try not to get hit while you take the person down. So most of the striking in jiu-jitsu would be to set up a clinch or to get in a place where you can apply leverage. As it grew, naturally, every art goes through this, judo and everything else. You start to develop competitions, and then the competitions get popular. And then you have to incorporate a rule set so people can follow, so you can measure their performance easier. And then as that spreads, you have different organizations, different rule sets. And then the trends in jiu-jitsu start to come up. Like I remember when the half guard was this new thing. Then it was butterfly guard. And then it was this guard and that guard. And then it was grips. And it goes on. But, so you'll have like waves of trends. But I don't think you can talk to anyone that's trained in jiu-jitsu that will see a brand new technique for the first time. Mm-hmm. People that are doing it in the trends of the competition are really sometimes genuinely under the impression that they invented some new move. And I don't know about you, I haven't invented a move yet. I discover things and I'm like, oh, that's cool. I've never done that before. Not like, so, but the focus now is more on achieving something by the expiration of time, as opposed to waiting until the time is right. Mm-hmm. If that makes any sense.
So, it does. You see that in MMA too.
Same thing. Like we'll just win the round and then cruise, and it's okay that you agreed mutually to that rule set. My preference is to go for submissions at all times, and you can have as many points as you like as long as I get a submission. And a lot of Pedro Sauer guys are like that. But if you compete, you have to accumulate points on the way to the submission. So you can't complain about a rule set that you mutually agreed upon.
Sure.
Because you're going to compete. But our specific style of jiu-jitsu is submission oriented, and that's the number one goal in all of jiu-jitsu. And if you get points, fine. But if you're going to compete and points are a factor, then you have to know the point system as well. But we're still going to hunt submissions, and then I think that's just one of the indicators or the telling signs of our jiu-jitsu.
So to kind of flip the script on that, how has 27 years of grappling and jiu-jitsu evolved and changed you?
So what I personally like is you root out everything that you like and don't like about yourself, right? So you'll do things, and I think a lot of times people have this inherently too high of an opinion of themselves, right? And then you realize that you're not quite as tough or as good as you thought you were, or maybe you are more strong. than this person, or you can overpower them for 3 minutes and then they get you, you know? So you become more accepting of self. You become more aware of self, and you get like servings of humility and appreciation every day. You get a teaspoon of it, you know, you get things that heal. And very rarely does medicine taste good, but it usually makes you better. And you learn how to take that in a much more accepting way. And the challenge for a lot of people is you have to develop appreciation for when you get caught, not frustration. And if you show appreciation, most people will show you what they learned. And this is me too. I'm talking about me and everybody else. Instead of saying, how come that happened? Maybe we should ask, how do I do that or prevent it again? And much more troubleshooting. And even in business and in life, it's about posturing. It's about positions. It's about, are you being in a position or are you trying to be an imposition? And an opposing game will always wear out, right? So because your muscle it only has so much fuel. You only have so much gas in the tank. But what will last forever is the alignment that you put your body in. And I think that can be the mindset for life too, is like, yeah, you know, you can get upset at someone cutting you off in the car on the way. And you're like, or you can be like, well, I'm alive. That was a good one. I don't like that you did. I'm going to let you go because you're going to probably get pulled over, get in a wreck. Different, right? So, and listen, you know, we all have moments of frustration, but hopefully the idea is as you get older, they become fewer and further between and less intense as you go. But it's really helped me handle, from teaching especially too, like just how to be a better parent, because I see the way some people parent kids and I'm like, wow, man, they just lay into their kids and they grab them by the chin. And I've never seen raising the voice make the message clearer. Like, hang on, 2 more decimals. Makes sense now. Right? It just doesn't. You know, we want to impart judgment and good decisions. We don't want to communicate frustration and negative energy on people. And that doesn't mean to be like, you know, this peace, love, and harmony kind of person at all points of your life. But there's a way to look at things. And, you know, you can choose to appreciate the rain for what it does, or you can complain that it's raining, you know. And jiu-jitsu will typically show you what to appreciate because it either happened to you or it happened for you. And both are evidence that it works, right? So I think that's just a good approach. I'm much more of a calm person because of jiu-jitsu for sure. So that's me personally.
Yeah, that was beautifully told. I really enjoyed listening to that. To kind of wrap up, we have a segment that I'm experimenting with. I'm not sure I like it yet, but okay. We call it 3 up, 3 down, kind of like Reddit. You know, you can upvote yourself. So what are between 1 and 3 things throughout your training, your growth, maybe your coaching, that you feel like you've done really well, that, you know, have helped yourself and your students, maybe your community, whatever. And then 3 things that you look back and you're like, I wish I would have done that differently.
So I think things that I've done, I'm proud of, is the culture that we have at our academy. I think hands down, it is an amazing culture. And the other thing I'm very proud of is we have 50% of our students are women, which is like unheard of in jiu-jitsu. And I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That comes back to the culture part. And then I think we're just really good at building a sense of community, because one of the main focuses is character development. And I want good people to leave here and have more people be better people entering society when they're prepared. So I think those are 3 things, and they're kind of broad, but at the same time, I think they're very pointed. Looking back, what I wish I did a little sooner was probably create that culture. And in the beginning, I used to make things more competitive based and between the students. And I think that's a very negative thing to do for culture. Make sure people compete against themselves and their own progress instead of their peers, because you wear the same patch, you're on the same team. Why would you hurt a teammate? You might hurt the person that was the best person for your individual training, and you injured because you didn't let go quick enough. And then the other thing I guess I would look back on, I don't know, I have to give a third one a thought. Those two come to, but, making it more about everybody at the same time. In the beginning, I probably had like a core group of people that I gave a little bit more attention to than others. And I think that's a big mistake. I think all the students require and deserve equal amount of attention from their instructors. And while I have a core group of people that work here full time and I spend the most time with them, you should never show favorites on the mat. No one should ever know that you have in your mind students that you like more than others. Everyone deserves the same experience. And I think that is just going to cause everything to grow, because anything that you do, like what you reinforce is what you multiply, and what you multiply is what you standardize. And, looking back, there's a couple of things I'd like to give to little tidbits of advice to everyone watching this. If you're a white belt or blue belt, number one, nobody gets a medal for being the toughest white belt that won't tap and quit. Stop being that guy. Go to class, learn. If you tap, shake their hand and figure out what happened, and then build from that. But you gotta just give yourself a break and give yourself time, because slow is smooth, smooth is fast, and then you have good tight movement. But you have to help your training partner as much as they have to help you. And the reciprocation goes in all directions. So if you want good training, you have to make sure your training partner gets training. Your job is to train your training partner. Their job is to train you. And the way it should go is team, teammate, me. And if it goes in that order, you're going to have a good academy. You can have an amazing academy. If it goes me, maybe them, I guess the team, you're not going to have an academy, and it won't last very long. So that's my advice. And I think it will make a big difference.
I love that platform of team, teammate, me. That was very insightful. Well, Mark, if some of my old rollers are interested in dropping in on your academy, how would they look you up and get in touch with you?
So the name of our academy is Integrated Martial Arts Academy. So you can do two things. You can go to the Pedro Sauer website and find us, or my website is MAFORU, like martial arts for you, MAFORU, or CarolinaBJJ.com. There's very few people with my last name. So if you Google my last name, I guarantee I'll be one of a very small group of people, and you'll be able to tell. I'll be the only guy in a jiu-jitsu gi. But if you're ever in North Carolina, man, stop in, train with us. Just shoot me a message, bring a gi. If you don't have one, I'll have one for you. But I guarantee you'll be treated with the utmost respect, and you'll get technical jiu-jitsu, and I think you'll have a good time. But I just appreciate you having me on this, and, being able to share my insights and my thoughts and experiences on things. But I want everyone to share jiu-jitsu and help it grow, because I know there's so many benefits to it, and it brings a lot of change that we need. It's good for everybody.
Well, when you say that you're glad I brought you on it, to give you like a little bit of background about the podcast, this is entirely a selfish endeavor. I want to listen to and learn from people who are, great coaches, nutritionists, strength and conditioning coaches, physical therapists, and try and find ways to help my grappling journey evolve in, the most efficient way, so that I can be as dangerous as possible for as long as possible, as fast as possible. And so this conversation, I can tell you, very honestly that I've taken things from this conversation already. When I go back and listen and take, notes for the show notes and stuff, these are lessons that I'm going to carry, to my jiu-jitsu to make me better. And so I'm also glad that I get to share that with, the old roller nation, so to speak, some of us youth impaired fellers, because there's value in getting that to that consensus. You can't just, assume that, like, I would have thought, I wouldn't have realized how important consistency is if everyone didn't say consistency is the key. And then with Lachlan Giles, who is an extremely high-level competitor and a physical therapist, he was talking about the injury prevention element of consistency. If we change our training load, we're almost exponentially more at risk of injury. So having a consistent training load not only improves our rate of development, but it also reduces our rate of hurting ourselves. And I could have never come to that conclusion on my own, you know, so that's what the podcast is for. And this talk, you know, fits right in with that. So it's just been an awesome one. And I can't thank you enough for your time and your insights.
Well, it's my pleasure. And I'm sure I'll see you somewhere in the community soon. But yeah, thanks again. And, you know, if you ever want referrals for people to talk to, I'd be glad to share some names too. And people that I, you know, really admire and respect and listen to. But yeah, and listen, if you're all doing jiu-jitsu, keep it up. Surgical precision jiu-jitsu. And keep rolling, man. Do it until you can't. And I'm going to be the guy that's 95 that they have to help off the mat. So, you know.
Hopefully I'm right there with you.
Yeah, man. So thank you very much.
Have a great day, Mark. We once again, I can't thank you enough.
All right. Well, take good care. All right.